Hi guys, my name's Chris. I just finished up work for the day. I wanted to take a quick walk and have a chat about something that's stuck in my mind, and I want you guys to help me work through this one. Australia has a huge problem. It's looming like a storm cloud. We have, and you're going to start hearing about it all over the news in the next year or two, Australia is about to hit $1 trillion in debt. $1 trillion in debt. That's huge. That's ridiculous numbers. I remember back when I was in high school, just graduating up in the early 2000s, and I started to look into politics, what's the government doing, because I had to start voting soon. And I was like, okay, how's it all work and stuff? But I had a look at Australia's debt back then, and I remember thinking 60 billion. Back in the early 2000s, 60 billion. Sometimes 59, 58, 60, but it was floating around that for a couple of years. I thought, man, 60 billion, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of dollary dues. But now, 20 years later, it's over 900 billion. It's gone up more than 15 times in 20 years. More than 15 times in 20 years, the debt's gone up. It's ridiculous. When we start looking at the amount the government's spending, they're just printing money, blowing money, printing money, blowing money. Our currency is getting completely debased. Our national debt is over 900 billion, and in the next year or so, it's going to go over $1 trillion for the first time in Australia's history from the actions that our government has been doing. As an idea, right now where we stand, our GDP to debt ratio, it's over 40%. Back in the early 2000s, back when I was looking at it, and I was like, man, 60 billion's a lot. Our debt to GDP ratio, 3%. 3% to over 40% now. It's staggering. Something's wrong. Something is grossly wrong to do that in 20 years. As an idea, just to put it in perspective how bad that debt to GDP ratio is, the equivalent to it being where it is right now, debt to GDP ratio, where it is right now, the equivalent is when World War I was finishing, and that's what Australia's state was. We're at that point now without a war occurring. We've blown it. Our government has absolutely blown it for us. What's happening right now is like if you were at a pub and you got your drunk mate and he's on the pokies and he's just running money through, just maxing out credit cards on the pokies. That's what our government's doing with the money right now. They're just running the money through, but each time that credit card maxes out for your mate on the pokies, well, you know, he shouldn't get a new credit card. But what's happening with the government is they're getting the new credit card, but the credit card companies are raising the limits so they can spend more each year. It's just going up and up and up. They just keep printing money. They just keep getting more money, spending more money, and the debt is going up. We're at the point where our interest on the debt is at $23 billion per year. So that's $23 billion per year that we're just fucking off. We're just fucking it off. That's money that the Australian people do not get to spend. It's just going off interest payments on that debt that they've created for us. Just to put this in perspective, what's $23 billion worth? If we didn't pay that in interest, what could it do for Australia, for the people living here in the country? Well, it would be free dental for everyone, and also childcare for everyone. That working class families, childcare would be free. Government would pay dental and childcare. Wouldn't cost a cent. But that's what the interest repayments are worth from our government just racking up so much debt on us, and now we are getting absolutely strangled by it. I've had a gutful of it. I'm absolutely done with it. Since the start of 2020, the printing, the devaluation of the Australian dollar that our governments have achieved for us, we've increased the monetary supply by over 59%. Over 59% of all the money that exists in Australia, it's been increased up by 59%. It's even more. Even more. But our wages since the start of 2020 has only increased by 21%. So our money's devaluing at a rapider and rapider rate. It's exponential almost, but wages aren't increasing, which means that the working class is getting left behind while everything gets more and more expensive. But it's not things moving up in price, it's the dollar becoming worth less and less. We're getting absolutely screwed, mate. I've got a fucking bone to pick with this government. The cost of living crisis that we're in right now, it's not random. This was manufactured. This is from our government's overspending, their poor choices around immigration, and just a complete mismanagement of any budget that they've been given. And they've just absolutely blown it to the point where the Australian dollar is becoming worth less and less. Therefore, for us, the average person, the average Australian out there, the battler going through, we're just seeing things getting more and more expensive as our wages aren't shifting up, our wages aren't moving up at that rate that the dollar's devaluing. Cocoa Pops. I was out shopping on the weekend. I saw a box of Cocoa Pops for $12. $12 for fucking Cocoa Pops. Are you fucking kidding me? Mate, to put in perspective how bad it's getting out there, 29% of families sending their kids back to school can't afford back to school costs. 15% of kids are going to school hungry. 3 million Australians are in poverty right now. 17% of Australian children are in poverty. Our government is making decisions that is literally starving the next generation of Australians. Well, they don't stand a chance. If this keeps going on the way it is, if things don't turn around, we are the Titanic. Australia is the Titanic. We've hit the iceberg. We're sinking. And we're being told it's all good. And if anything, the government, who's running the ship right now, they're saying full steam ahead. Let's keep going without realising the ship's going under. Our next generation is going to starve. How are we setting them up for any success when they can't even show up to fucking school with food right now? And that's so the government can keep doing their thing, keep printing the money. And all for what? What's the point of it all? So house prices keep going up. So the GDP doesn't look bad. So the political party in power right now can turn around and say, GDP looks good, therefore we're good. The economy's strong. Even though we are entrenched in a GDP loss per capita right now. Maybe so corporations can just keep reporting record profits. Is that what it's all for? Because all I see is my fellow Australian absolutely struggling with cost of living. I'm fed a gutful, mate. I'm fed up with it. Everyone else is fed up with it. You look around, how is your life improving from what the government's doing right now? Or is it just slightly getting harder and harder and harder each year? Something's wrong with it all. There is a problem. And we have a $1 trillion problem looming on the horizon. $1 trillion. Mate, what are we supposed to do? Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. How do we get through this? Over 3 million Australians are in poverty. 15% of children in Australia are going to school without food. 17% of children in Australia are in poverty. Now, as Australian citizens, we have the responsibility right now to do something. Because if we don't do something now and keep kicking the can down the road like the government's doing, and the government's very good at that, if we just kick the can down the road like they do, when's something going to change? And how far are we going to set up the kids for failure, our next generation for failure? Australia doesn't stand a chance unless we start making changes now.